Keeping your water clean. You can wipe your brush between colors on paper towel. So to start, I'm going to do a wash over the whole jar, except for this area where I'm going to preserve it. So I don't forget, I'm going to go ahead and draw that roughly to remind myself that it's there. You can go much more carefully around that, but you're going to run out of time before it dries, right? So I'm going to start from the top, and I'm going to go all the way down. Notice how careless I'm being. That is perfectly fine. You want to be quick with Viridian because it does stain, so you can get some of those edges too sharp. Lots of water. See it moving around on the page. Right up to the edge. And come back up here to check for those little divots, right, where the jar has it. What are those called? Does anybody know what those are called? Those, like, threads. That's it. That's it. Threads. If you are doing preservation on this side, you'd want to leave some light to match your highlight from your window, but I'm not doing that. I'm preserving my little window here. Notice how sloppily I am making my window. You never know. Maybe there's a curtain in the way. Maybe there's some flowers that are in the way. It's fine. If we're doing an exact window shape, that will end up drawing a ton of attention to it, right? Because that your eyes are going to be, oh, there's probably a window there. That's not the point of the picture. So I'm going to be sloppy on purpose. And I'm noticing that there is dust in my Viridian paint. So if you're like, why is it grainy? I don't know either. Okay, so this first layer is going to be brush strokey. It's going to be messy. Doesn't matter. This is the first of 7 layers. I'm going to do my Payne's Gray. Putting it in my palette first because I want to see how much is in my brush. Can't see it when I just stick it in there. Checking for creamy consistency. And then I'm going to follow the shape here. It's going to bleed. That's actually okay. I'm going to follow it all the way around. Do this thinner than I'm doing it. I'm realizing I'm going too fast. I'm not doing it as thin as I want. So I'm going to show you what would happen if you messed up and it's bleeding where you don't want it to bleed. So pretend, and it is actually happening. Pretend I don't want it to bleed up like that because this is not a coral reef. I'm going to grab my paper towel, panic for a second. Oh no, oh no. And then I'm going to just press it and clean it up a little bit. Push it back down. If you're thinking, oh no, now you can see this light and white, we're going to put a couple more layers on. So just kind of pushing it back where I actually wanted it.
Did you say that was Payne's Gray? Or
it is. Okay. It's Payne's Gray, yes. And the reason why it bled so much is because it was too wet. So I hope you guys are nice and encouraged that I mess up too. So we need to do our next layers. I'm going to do layers up here in the neck. This is where paying attention where the threads are is important. So I'm going to mix a tiny bit of Payne's Gray. You can see there's just a shadow of it in my palette right there. Get my green back. If the green was there, you wouldn't have even noticed me putting a little bit of Payne's Gray into it. All I'm doing is slightly darkening it. It doesn't need to be exact. We're just trying to keep moving darker, darker, darker. So I'm going to carry this shadow up here. Notice it's mostly green, not blue. Because that intense green blue of the mason jar is very intense in its neck and the upper sections, right? Because that glass gets thicker. I'm going to skip this big lip, and I'm going to paint up here. I'm going to skip this little thread. Right now what we're doing is kind of trying to create a little bit of separation between the threads so you can see them. We're going to keep layering on top of it. They might get a little lost, but that's okay. So if you like things to be perfect, your perfection, desire for perfection might actually make it not perfect.
It's drawn like that.
Yeah, if it's drawn like that, because that's how the jar lid closes properly. Okay. So again, at this point, it's really starting to look more mason jar-y. Hooray. But let's keep going. Okay. Same color, Viridian green. I'm going to follow this around, but I'm going to be a little bit more picky. This is dry on dry. and very thin. We're going to try this time to have more control using the Viridian. Going around again. This is important again for people that like to be perfect. Turn your paper. Your arm goes to the right or left if you're left-handed. You need more control to get this very sharp edge. And turn your paper because your arm isn't designed to. Hope you all know what that means. So if you want to be fancy, and I'm going to be fancy, I'm going to bump this out a little bit like this, pretending that that's where the letters are, right?
Oh, wow, you are fancy.
Yep, so fancy. And like that to if the whole painting is wobbly, that won't translate, right? But if I'm going to get my edges really clean, and we're hoping to, that will make sense. But if you're like, nope, my whole painting is a little bit wobbly, then don't do it. Because it'll just accentuate the other wobbles. Now when you come down here, go up, like the glass on bottom does. Keep going around. And because this is dry on, or I should say wet onto dry, you have way more control, right? But we're not getting cool effects. So to do that, we'll re-wet it and wake it back up later. Going around and around. Once again, I'm going to do another layer on the neck here. I'm going to add a little bit of Payne's Gray, darkening up a little bit. Need a little more Payne's Gray. I'm going to just go straight with Payne's Gray. Creating that shadow underneath. Okay. Again, ugly phase, but it's getting there. I'm going to use a little bit more Payne's Gray. I just took the water out of my brush so I could be much more precise. And I'm going underneath that thread. This is a shadow. The brush is really wet there when I added more paint, so I touched my paper towel first. So I have more control. Going underneath that thread to create a shadow. The paper's already wet, so it's bleeding around a little bit, and that's great because I didn't touch the other threads. They're not going to get wet. The paint's not going to bleed into them. Okay. So you can see it begin to develop. The depth, the darkness that would be here in this section would not be at the top. So I'm going to stop. I'm not going to keep taking that shadow all the way up. Maybe a little bit here. She said changing her mind immediately. Okay. Smoothing out down here. Now this got kind of dark. That's fine. But I'm going to take, while it's still wet, and I'm going to lift just the middle. And do you see the light bouncing off the bottom now of our jar? Ooh ah. That's what we're learning. We're learning ooh ah. Power of light. So we're building up the depth of the painting. That's where that luminosity comes in. Again, this is where we're headed. This has a lot less detail because we have a bigger jar here. I'm able to be a little bit more, so like that wiggles on the side, stuff like that. Okay, so now we've kind of built the structure of our jar, and we're happy with it. I'm going to go over the entire jar, except our preserved highlight, with Viridian again. And I'll pull some of the Payne's Gray in to darken it up a little bit. And to be fancy, I'm going to tiny touch the ultramarine and put it in there because ultramarine does really cool things. It's when it spreads around. So a little bit of ultramarine. Don't turn it blue. It should stay green. See, we're still green. I touched a little blue in there, but it's still green. I'm going to test paper. The whole neck up here is still wet. So I'm going to wait and do the neck in a minute. I'm going to paint all the rest of this while I'm waiting for that to dry. Stopped to add just water to my already painty brush. Got more paint. I'm going back and forth, trying to create the same shade all the way down. Avoid scrubbing if you want to keep a line, but I do not. You see this sharp line? We're getting rid of him. I'm going to paint right up against it and go back and forth a couple times, and it softens it out. Down here, I passed by pretty quickly because I did want to keep that line. I didn't want to scrub it. But it's uneven, so I'm going to come over here because part of me is like Dorian. Okay. All right, so that, whoop, I'm sorry. Let's move that back down. Now that the bottom half is damp, the top half is mostly dry. I'm going to get some more Viridian. Okay, I'm going to touch my paper towel because I don't know how intense this is. It's pretty intense. I'm going to add a little bit more water to my brush and then touch it to my paper towel again. You see the shade difference? Mm-hmm. It's slight, but it's important. Now I'm going to go in. Ooh, now I'm going to go in to do the whole top again. The whole thing. Don't panic. Yeah, I know. Don't panic. Don't scrub, because you got your layers under there. Clean your brush. Now we're going to do lifting with the brush. So we're going to use the thirsty brush method, which means the brush is clean, but then it's smashed against the paper towel. So it's ready to pull, okay? So I'm going to touch, because this is so great for the brush because it's so narrow, right, in this area. The paper towel cannot get in here very easily. So I'm picking it up and putting it on my paper towel. Picking it up, putting it on my paper towel. Pulling it across, paper towel. So I could have not gone over top of this. Y'all are probably thinking that. But I wanted to show you how to do thirsty brush method. Now we're going to move to the bottom again. And we're going to use just Payne's Gray to darken all those edges. And this is where the magic starts to happen as the contrast picks up. Payne's Gray has a lot of blue in it. Not see that on there. Let me move this over a little bit. Too bad. So Payne's Gray is actually a blue, dirty gray blue. I'm going to use this down here. I touched it. It's slightly cold, which means it's probably not perfectly dry. It's dry enough to do our edge. So I'm going to go around and we're going to do as thin as possible, because you can always thicken it as thin as possible. My hands shake fairly often.
Would you want to use a thinner brush?
You could. That would be wisdom. Y'all are learning more than I'm teaching you, which is great. Going all the way around again. Going around, going around. Do that. I'm gonna make this bottom part a little darker. Because I'm right-handed, it's gonna be lopsided, and I know that. I'm gonna flip it upside down, and now we can see how lopsided it is. Okay, so now we're starting to get that stark edge that it would not be in reality, right? It would be softer than this. I'm going to create more starkness because we're going to come back and water it all down. So I want it to be good and dark before I come back in with that final layer of green. And you're thinking, final layer of green? No, it's going to be too dark. Maybe. Let's trust the process. So I'm going back over places where the paint was thinner than I preferred and darkening it up. Nice and dark under the neck of the bottle. Jar. Try to keep your bottle glass consistent all the way around, with the exception of up here. It'll be much thicker. And that top part is still wet, so I'm gonna wait and not mess with it. The neck of my jar is clean. It's clean. It's dry, and so I'm gonna go back in to get those details back. Some of that stuff. Again, I'm using the thirsty brush method. Clean brush, smushed it into paper towel. I'm gonna do it again because that was a little purple. And I'm gonna go in and scrub lightly. Smash. See it appear? Scrubbing lightly. Smash. Down at the bottom, this is too harsh, so I'm going to soften it while I wait for the neck to dry. So I have a little bit of paint spray in my brush and a little bit of water to soften that up. More paint spray for my shadows, testing how much water is in my brush on my paper towel, so I have control for the shadows. You might think, why are you doing so many steps? The layers build luminosity, and we want that. And bring your jars of lavender so we can all admire and be amazed. Oh, I'm realizing I forgot one detail. Thank you. I want to go around this edge with darkness just a little bit.
No, M's work.
I'm going to let this completely dry before I put another layer of Viridian over top of it. In the meantime, I'm going to wake up my sap green. Because I think sap green is too intense most of the time, I'm going to just stick it into the ultramarine briefly to chill it out a little bit. Literally and figuratively.
Was that because I thought the sun was coming from the other direction?
You're right. I tried to lift this, but it was too wet.
Oh.
So I will continue to lift it. Because you're right. This whole neck, this whole lip should be brighter. The whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is too light over here compared to over here. That's a good
I just
observation.
Sure I was understanding.
Yes. No, it couldn't lift this because it was still too wet when I came in to with my paper towel. So I'm going to go back and lift it once it doesn't find it. Also, the next layer of Viridian is going to cover the whole thing. You could probably smooth that out if I wasn't paying attention to it.
I'm so glad to hear that you're enjoying it.
So while that's drying, I'm going to do some of my stems here with the sap green mixed with a little bit of ultramarine to kind of cool it down a touch. If you want to use a thinner brush, you can. That might give you a little bit more control. But remember, we're making something that's organic. These are stems, so we don't really need to be super perfect with it. So as I put my first stroke down, I'm noticing it's really dark, and that's fine. But I actually want to create some lighter ones in the background. So I'm going to stop, water down my color by dipping my brush in the water. Let me move this over a little bit so you can see it better. So I'm adding some water to the sap green I already mixed. And I'm going to touch it to my paper towel to see. Yep, it is lighter. And then I'm going to do some of these, thinking about which ones are going to be in the background. They would be a little bit lighter. And I still think I want it to be lighter, so I'm going to touch my paper towel to pick up some of that paint. And continue. Okay, so I've created some lighter ones in the background. Now I'm going to go back to my darker green, more concentrated, and finish up. And it's okay if I'm going right over top of wet ones, like ones that haven't dried completely yet, because the greens can intermingle and be just fine. Okay, so there's my stems. While that's drying, we're going to switch back to working on our mason jar. So I'm going to clean that sap green pretty well out of my brush. Okay, if there's a little bit of sap green left in the brush, that's okay. I'm going to go back into my Viridian and wake it back up. A quick scrub with some water. I already have a puddle here, but I want to make sure I have enough paint to do a whole layer of the entire jar. Okay. This is a cream texture or consistency where it flows but not a whole lot. See how it won't close up that gap? That's a cream texture. It's slowly filling in. If it was milk or tea, it would have closed up much faster. Okay, so I know I have a good puddle here. It's pretty dark, which to me is probably not what I want for this whole thing. So I'm going to start with the dark, but then I'm going to add water by going over to my water cup over and over instead of going back to my paint. So I'm going to start at the bottom of my jar and work my way up. I'm purposefully going back over all of these shadows that I've done. I'm going to get more paint this time instead of water. I thought I might need water, but I'm happy with how dark this is. This time around, I'm being more careful because this is one of our final layers. Careful to keep avoiding our saved light, our preserved light here. Make sure though that you're getting this edge wet because you want that dark edge we created to bleed into the new green that we're putting down because it gives it that glowing, softened, ethereal. All right, now I'm going to just use water because there's a lot of green down. And I'm just getting it wet and pulling it around. There's plenty of green paint already down. I'm just using the water to soften it up. So see how this edge is dark and soft and this edge is still hard. I'm going to come back over here and go up and down a little bit over top of it. Get it to bleed just a little bit. And then down here, I would like there to be a little bit more light. So I'm going to come back with my paper towel in a second. Again, softening up these edges. They're too hard. Cleaning. And with my wet, clean-ish brush, I'm going to go across the bottom down here. Swipe, swipe. And with paper towel, lift. Lift. So we brought back just a touch of light down there that we don't want to lose. But it did make this line disappear a touch, so I'll come back perhaps to give that more definition. But that's me being really picky. Do not actually need to get all of this exactly right. If you think about it, the water, the jar, like it's old, this light, it's believable without being perfect already. All right, while I haven't done the neck yet, I'm going to go get some green again, making my brush wet. I'm going to test it on my paper towel. I think it might need to be a touch darker, so I'm going to go get a little bit more. And then I'm going to cover over the entire jar again. If you decided to save some of your highlights, you can avoid those. For me, I didn't save anything. Probably should have, but I didn't. Clean my brush. Notice how this is light and this is dark. I want to even that out. So I'm just going to drag my brush back and forth across this area to even that out a little bit. Now, while it's wet, we're going to decide where we want to preserve our light. So we're going to take our paper towel, and mine's pretty wet and dirty, so I need to be careful that I'm only using clean, dry sections of it. I'm going to press that into some of these lines where I want the light to come back. You can also use your brush. I'm going to actually do that to illustrate it better. Clean, and then, well, clean-ish. And thirsty brush, which means I pressed it here first. I'm going to go here and get this highlight back. I'm just wiping it with a clean brush, taking that paint up. Over here as well. Wipe, 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 wipe. Clean brush. Wipe, 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 wipe. Clean brush. Wipe, 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 wipe. Clean it off. And I'm thinking that I want to lighten up the top here just a little bit. So I'm going to do the same thing there. Swipe and wipe. Sounds gross, but you know, it's fine. Now, again, to soften up these edges, just like we did down here, I'm going to intentionally rub against the dark, dark edge there with my brush. And brush is too dry, so I'm going to go get it wet a little bit. Try that again. There we go. Soften it up so it's not so harsh. Soften it up, not so harsh. We don't want to lose this darkness. We do want to keep that, but we don't want it to be a stark contrast. So I'm just tapping along that edge. So now our jar is mostly done. We can think about where the light is coming from now. The light is coming from this direction. Maybe there's a window over here, right? It's shining, it's bouncing off this shoulder of the jar. That means that there's probably light coming in at an angle like this or like this. That means that this side of the outside of the glass has probably got some highlights here and up here. And maybe there's some light down in the bottom of the jar as well. So I could re-wet this area and blot it some to kind of grab some of that light back, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to think about how there would be water in the jar. So I won't worry about the light. If there was no water in the jar, I might lighten up some of the middle of the jar because light would be passing through it more easily. But we're going to have water in it, maybe dirty water even a little bit. So we don't want to worry about extra light pockets. But you could experiment with it and see what happens. Okay, this is still wet, so I don't want to do any detail work like adding in the water line. Actually, let's see what kind. Okay, it's cool to the touch, not shiny, so this is perfect. So with our Viridian one more time, and our Payne's Gray mixed in with it a bit, we're going to create a water line. So if you're looking at the jar from above, the water line would be a smile. If you're looking at it directly straight on, it would be straight across with a slight arch. That's kind of what angle I think we're taking on this. So I'm going to decide, if you did it straight down the middle, that's fine, but I don't think it actually is as pretty as going below or above. So I'm going to decide my water's a little bit high. I've got Viridian and Payne's Gray in the brush, just a bit. And I'm making a straight line across with a very slight arch in the middle, okay? Now we've got this band, right? Ugly. So I'm going to drag it down with swipes of my brush, just swipes. If your brush is loaded with paint, this is not going to work quite this way. So you might need to clean it up in between. Swipe, swipe, swipe. If you have brush strokes happening with this, you can see them a little bit. Then clean your brush out with just water and gently go down with water. Keep this edge sharp though up there because you do want it to be highlighting the fact that there's water in the jar. Okay. Notice this and this are almost the same tone. This isn't so much darker because it wouldn't be. It's clear water. Light's passing through it. It shouldn't be tons darker than this area. So just this suggestion of a water line is what we want. Okay. While that's drying, yeah, it's still drying. I'm gonna put my lavender flowers in. Cleaning my brush, but I'm not being too picky about it. We made our color using ultramarine and quinacridone red or quinacridone rose. And then I watered it down a bunch here in the corner and it dried up and separated, so I'm going to reactivate it just throughout the whole area. Good. Now similar to the way we did our stems, we want some light and some dark. So I'm going to use this watered down color first. And lavender has little clumps, so I'm going to think about that as I'm making my little strokes. You can use a smaller brush if you want to. I'm holding my brush not straight up and down, not sideways, somewhere in between. Usually this is the way that I handle my brush all the time. Okay, so I'm just putting my brush, touching it down and lifting it back up, touching it down and lifting it back up, and it's creating little marks on either side. You can also use a downward stroke like this, like you're writing. I would alternate it a little bit, and don't be picky. Just try to create little clumping sections, leaving space in between. Less is more. You can always go back. You can't undo it. Well, not easily. And at the end, just make sure it points up, like a Christmas tree or like a stalk of wheat. Okay, so I'm going to go around and paint all the rest of these. The ones that are the darkest, I'm going to come back and put another layer on. These lighter ones, I'm gonna leave just the lavender, this lighter shade of lavender, excuse me. In fact, I'm gonna water it down even more. Just dipping my brush in the water, touching the side of it, not the tip, on paper towel to pull some of that water out. And these lightest stems here, I'm just gonna give like a little suggestion. The reason why is because now these ones will disappear into the background a little bit, creating a sense of depth. So just the lighter stems, I'm making this decision to put everything light together. There's only a few of them that are really that light, so. All right, I'm gonna go back to my medium shade of lavender to complete these. The video doesn't quite show how much is happening, but you get the idea. Cleaning out the purple out of my brush. Again, not being super picky about it, but getting the purple out if we can. And now I'm happy with this. This is, to me, this is complete. If you wanted to, you could go back in and put another layer of the darker area, or soften up a little bit more of these edges, but I'm happy with the way it is. Up here, I'd like some more light. So this is dry to the touch and not even cold anymore, so that's really dry, which is great. I'm gonna go in with a clean brush, just with water, and I'm gonna wet this section and scrub back and forth because I wanna get a little more light out of it, if I can. Clean paper towel, smush and lift. This one, scrubbing back and forth, smush and lift. And as I'm going along, I'm just gonna do that to all the areas that I want more light. So this whole neck, I want it a little bit lighter. I'm getting risky here with this paper towel because it's dirty, but you will use a cleaner paper towel, right? Right. I feel like I'm losing this thread a little bit, so I'm gonna push it back outward like that. Smush and lift. Okay, so I'm not going to agonize over it too much because we are going to come back in with our acrylic paint pen. But if you want to be a purist, you could continue to scrub and lift, or you could have from the beginning put down some masking fluid on these neck pieces. Or you could have put down more definitive, like drawn highlights so that you could avoid it, like here. For our purposes today, I am smushing and lifting. If you're hesitating with your smushing of your paper towel, it could be because your paper towel is really dirty. You're worried it's going to stain. It's another part of it. So get a clean one and keep going. All right. So I brought back some of the light that's in the neck, or in the threads here. So I'm happy with that, but I still would like a few places to have this intense kind of highlight where the light would really be hitting it. So here, here, and here. But those are slightly damp, so I'm going to wait a few more minutes to let them dry. While that's happening, I'm going to go back up here to decide if I want to add some more depth to my lavender by creating another layer of a little bit darker. I'm just going to do that for a few of them. See how that pulls it together, pulls it forward a little bit. Remember, don't do this to all of them. Do this to the ones that are closer to you. Leave these ones in the back lighter. Pulling these ones forward with an extra layer of color really gives a sense of three-dimensionality. And realism too sometimes. You could also incorporate more ultramarine into this layer, so it's not just the same purple, but a different tone, and that could be really beautiful. A different hue, I think is what I mean to say, not tone. Okay. Now, this area is still wet, so I need to be continuing to avoid it for now before I put in my last highlights. But now that I'm done with my lavender up here, I'm going to communicate the stems down here into the jar and into the water. I'm not going to use the sap green. You could use the sap green for this, but typically when you put flowers in mason jars, the color of the jar really affects how dark the stems look down below. So we're just going to use our same Viridian that we've been using with a touch of Payne's Gray in it to communicate those stems. But when we do, this is optional, but it will really help with the realism. Water bends, it creates an optical illusion of the stems being bent or broken. So when I come down with the stem and get to this water line, I'm actually going to shift my brush over slightly and continue it. This makes sense when you look at jars at certain angles. It can look like it's at the stems are kind of in a different spot. I don't know how else to explain it, but next time you look at a vase full of flowers, if the vase is translucent, you'll see what I mean. At certain angles, it looks like the stems are broken or offset. Okay, so same Viridian I've been using for my layers. A little bit of Payne's Gray in it. I'm actually gonna pause real quick. Testing it on my paper towel first to see how intense it is. Yeah, this is a little bit intense. I'm not sure this is gonna look right, so I'm touching more water into it. Touch, all right. So we don't need to mirror exactly what's happening up here down below, but we do need to pay attention, like I said, to when it comes down to this water line, it shifts over, okay? So don't stress about this. If you want to just go straight down because that's easier, that is totally fine. Most people are not going to look at your picture and go, why didn't you do the water offset? Make sure though, if you do the offset, that they're all offset in the same place, like all shifted to the right or all shifted to the left. Coming down, reaching the water line, going over. See the skip? I did not draw it onto the water line. I skipped the water line and then came below it. See how it's creating a sense of the water being, having affected what's in the jar, the illusion of it. Coming down, and slightly over here. And you don't need to do exactly the amount of stems as you have up above, down below, but you definitely want to make sure you do enough of them that it makes sense. Okay. As I'm going along, if you notice me make a mistake, don't confuse yourself like I really might have made a mistake. So if you don't like something I did, or if you think perhaps the outcome wasn't as successful as you would like to be, definitely do your own thing your own way, and you may have a better outcome. Some of the things I'm doing intentionally a little bit differently to teach something. And if you think another method is easier or just you're more comfortable with it, do it. Okay, so I could keep going with another layer of stems, but I'm gonna let that dry for now. Maybe I'll come back in with a few darker ones, again, to create a sense of depth. Again, this is the magic of watercolor, is layering upon layering upon layering to really communicate something about space and light. And watercolor is the perfect medium for that. So we're gonna let that dry. Up here, I'm gonna check, yep, this is dry. So now we're going to go off-roading when it comes to the world of watercolor. We're going to use an acrylic paint pen like this, or a gel pen. This is an acrylic gel pen. I'm going to start with this because I have more control because it's such a fine point. So I know that ink is flowing in this, so I'm gonna just touch it in gently. You don't wanna draw with a sharp edge. And I already can tell that the watercolor is going into the pen, so I'm gonna stop and clean it. Or stop and scribble onto a clean sheet of paper, which I also have over here, so I'm gonna do that. Make sure the ink is flowing. Okay, a little bit of light. A little bit of light. So this is very fine, very tiny details. For expediency's sake, and just because I want to show you how to use another method, I'm going to use my acrylic paint pen. This is just a cheap one I have on Amazon. And I'm going to go ahead and pump it twice on a piece of paper and get it flowing. I know it's flowing now. So this is pretty wet, so you're going to be really careful with it, because once it's down, it's down. So I'm going to test it actually on my saved light here below, just to get it, see how it's going. Yep, it's definitely nice and bright. Be careful when you use this type of paint, adding back in white, because this white might be different than your paper white. So that's okay over here because they're separate from each other. But if you're trying to fix an error, like this little paint dot, let me show you. Little paint dot up here that happened. If I were to take this acrylic white and go straight into it like that, it would still really show a lot, because this white is brighter than the cream paper. So just be conscious of that. If you're using this white on top of the white paper, you might notice a difference in shade, which you might not want. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. All right, because I have a bigger highlight here, I know the paint pen's a good option for that. Right over top of it. Less is more, guys. You cannot take it back up when you're done. Okay, so there, and that's so bright, so I'm gonna have to do it up here to copy that just a touch. And I'm gonna pause, clean the pen, so I'm done with it. While that's still wet, I'm gonna take my brush. Don't do this with one of your favorite brushes. I'm just gonna pull the paint out a little bit. And I'm gonna actually use some of it that's still in the brush to do that different light there. Put it in there. And at this point, it's very tempting to do more. Just keep going with light. Don't do it. Don't do it. Just put it in the places it belongs. You can't. It's very difficult to paint over top of, which I will show you. Now, while that paint is still wet in your brush, get it off. Get it off, get it off, get it off. Acrylic is plastic, and the plastic will bond with this plastic and never come off. So don't use your best brush, and clean your brush as soon as possible if you're going to paint using the acrylic paint pen paint on the paper. So we're going to let that dry. While it's drying, I hope you can tell this, well, you cannot really tell from the video, but this color is bluer and lighter than the paper. Paper is creamier, these highlights are bluer and lighter. That's okay, but it's something to pay attention to. The white that I put down is slightly translucent. The acrylic paint pen is slightly translucent. So if I really wanted it to be super bright and not soft at all, then I would do another layer once it was dry. But as it is, being slightly translucent works in our favor so that it's not super stark. So I'm using a little bit of gouache that's dried up on this card, activating it with water. My water is actually fairly green, I'm noticing. That's interesting, because my water has been used for the meridian quite a bit. So that's okay in this case, because we're actually painting directly on meridian. But if we wanted it to be clean, stay bright, we would need to use clean water and clean brush. So you can see the tip of my brush is disappearing in the video because it's full of white paint. Yeah, you can see it, that's better. So the brush was brown, but the end of it is fully white. That's how I know the gouache is good and thick, gonna be opaque, okay? So don't get this in your palette, and it will change your watercolors irreparably. Keep your gouache in another place. I use a teacup that is a different color than white, it's purple, and I just store my gouache in that teacup at home. This light over here. Now I'm immediately seeing a problem. This light is almost as bright as that, so I need to be careful, because this is reflected light over here. The window is not over here. So we just need to be careful how bright we make this side with our highlights. Thankfully, the gouache is water downable. That's going to be a word that I'm using. All right. I'm going to Put a little bit of light across the top here. This is optional. I'm gonna pause. Notice how these whites are not as bright as those. That's intentional. Our light is coming from this direction. I'm gonna clean my brush by wiping it on paper towel first, and then in my water. Than those lights, which is good, because we wanna make sure that our brightest whites are coming from our brightest direction, which is where the sun's coming from the window in our imagination. You could also add a soft light here, another reflected light on top of that shoulder of the jar. I'm actually gonna do that because I wanna try it. A little bit more gouache, and purposefully not getting it as thick as you could get it because I want this light to be soft. Okay, so there's a little reflected light over there, maybe. Cleaning my brush. So these lights up here and these, they seem a little bit harsh to me. Like I want the edges to be softened. With gouache, I can do that. I can come over here and just gently soften it up like you do with watercolor. Problem. Gouache is very cooperative in that way. Soft, 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 no problem. But on this side, these are acrylic. So whatever is here, it's here. Let me show you. If I try to soften it, nothing's going to happen. I'm just activating the viridian green below it and causing that to bleed upward. Maybe we could use that to soften the edge of the acrylic by putting some green over top of it. Get the point. This is not the way that this is supposed to work. Ideally, put down your acrylics at the very end, very controlled way, and not have to worry about softening up any edges. So the way to avoid your acrylics being, the acrylic addition being too intense, is to use it very sparingly and to soften those edges while it's still wet with a wet brush. But I recommend using gouache instead. This is one layer of gouache. If I added 2 more layers, it would be as bright as this is. So I suggest learning to use gouache instead of falling back on using acrylics. But it's fine for what we're doing today. It's fine for other things you might want to try it with, experiments and that sort of thing. But if you're wanting control and be able to continue to layer, gouache is your friend. Watercolor. Gouache dries darker, then you put it down. So layers for it are important, just as they are for watercolor. Okay, so I could keep messing with this, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to be content, and I'm going to be aware that my eyes see my own work more harshly than the world sees it. That is what I call artistic brain damage. So resist the urge to keep messing with it. Okay, one last thing we need to do to our painting is anchor our item in space. Right now, our jar is floating in space, which could be a decision that you choose to make, or could be that you actually want it to be sitting on a table. I do. So I'm going to use my lavender color, really light, really soft, and all I'm going to do is just create a little swipe across the bottom. You can actually go over top of your jar. It's not going to hurt it. But don't go twice because then it'll start bleeding. That's it. Clean out my brush, clean water, and I'm just going to run underneath of it with clean water back and forth until I reach that purple. Let it bleed and fade on its own. Don't mess with it. Just let it sit. Let it dry and do its soft watercolor thing. Okay. So once again, we used Payne's Gray, Ultramarine, Viridian, Sap Green, and Violet to create this picture. If you don't have violet, you can mix Ultramarine with quinacridone rose or quinacridone red or scarlet or alizarin crimson. One of those reds will help you create your own lavender. You can also just use ultramarine in different levels of different levels of intensity to create those different colors that we have here, and just do blue, and that could probably look like lavender as well. Okay, that's it. If y'all have any questions, then send them to me. this was doable and that you learned something.